Today we have a very special program dedicated exclusively to address a rather very important topic that emerged a month or so ago. Yesterday, more than 300 news publications, TV, radio, digital print, coordinated a message to the people of the United States, to Americans, and the gist of the message was to encourage each and every individual to fight and to stand for freedom of speech, for freedom of expression. Now, it would sound silly or even useless to address such a topic. After all, the United States is a democratic system, which implies there is already embedded into the very system of government the freedom of speech, the freedom of expression. However, as it is most likely obvious to everybody, whether you are a Democrat or you are a Republican, since for 2 years now, there has been a constant, frequent, and sustaining attack on the media. From the very first day that Donald Trump took the oath of office, ironically, this day that you may remember, that was January 20th, 2017, in front of hundreds of witnesses and millions of TV viewers here in the United States and across the world, Donald Trump raised his hand to uphold the Constitution of the United States. And one of the most important pillars in that Constitution is the freedom of speech, the freedom of expression. Now, this particular program is not geared to discuss why one individual voted for Donald Trump and the other did not. This is not to address whether you were right to vote for him or you were wrong to vote for him. This particular program is to address that important topic called freedom of speech and freedom of expression. As mentioned shortly, Donald Trump has gone into a sustaining attack on the media and calling the media fake news. Now, I want you to be able to separate your support for Donald Trump and the topic of freedom of speech. And the reason I would like, if at all possible, for you to be able to do that is because freedom of speech is absolutely necessary for democracy to survive, for democracy to exist. Now, let me give you a tidbit of history when it comes to freedom of speech. In 1933, in Germany, Adolf Hitler was elected on January 30th, 1933, Chancellor of Germany. Now, contrary to what a lot of people may think in terms of Adolf Hitler, because every single time we talk about Adolf Hitler, we usually mention that Adolf Hitler was a dictator. We usually mention that, and it seems that the details of what happened before Adolf Hitler became a dictator was always lost in the process. Now, the reason I mention that is because in 1933, Adolf Hitler was the most popular head of state in the world. Yes, you heard right, you heard correctly. Adolf Hitler was the most popular head of state in the world. The whole country, of course, there were a few elements in the French part of the country that obviously had some problem, because no matter how popular someone is, there is always a group who would not necessarily go along, who would not necessarily like the individual. We can even take the history in the Bible where Jesus came to save the world, and yet there were plenty of people who actually wanted him dead. It's just a way to make the point that no matter how like an individual is, there would always be someone or a group of people who do not like that person. Now, go back to Adolf Hitler. He was a very popular individual head of state. Adolf Hitler did not start as a dictator. He started as a populist, and young, old, children, old people, they all like Adolf Hitler. He was a very charismatic individual. Now, I say all that for a very simple reason. It's because every time that I have a conversation with an individual who supports Donald Trump, the conversation always comes back to the argument that Donald Trump is not Adolf Hitler, and Donald Trump has not or did not kill 6 million Jews, or there is a number of arguments that try to distance Donald Trump from Adolf Hitler, because Adolf Hitler was a dictator, was a monster. Now, I brought that to make the point that Adolf Hitler did not start as a dictator. He started as a very popular individual, liked by the whole country. In fact, Adolf Hitler's popularity is something that Donald Trump would ever have here in the United States. Donald Trump has 40% or less of individuals who support him. Adolf Hitler enjoyed up to 90% of the German population who actually love him. It's just to give you a sense of, when we talk about Adolf Hitler being a dictator, it didn't start out that way. It started as someone the whole country loved. Now, the same way that you see today that Donald Trump, every chance he has, he tweets, in interviews, at rallies, he accused the media of being fake. He calls the media fake news. Now, this is a very dangerous situation for any democracy. Germany was a democracy when Adolf Hitler became chancellor. It was known as the Weimar Republic, and it has a constitution just like here in the United States, and it has Reichstag and Reichsrat, which are the equivalent of Congress and the Senate here in the United States. And they had in their constitution written the freedom of speech, the freedom of expression, the freedom to move about. Pretty much the same structure, or at least similar structure, I should say, that we have here. Just like Donald Trump was elected Chancellor of Germany, Adolf Hitler was appointed legitimately Chancellor of Germany. Now, Adolf Hitler uses popularity to consolidate power. Just like Donald Trump accusing the media of fake news, Adolf Hitler was accusing the media of fabrication. There is a very strong parallel between the two. So Adolf Hitler didn't become a dictator overnight, but it started the same way that you see here in the United States. Donald Trump accusing the media of fake news, Adolf Hitler accusing the media of fabrication. Now, I said all that because the danger of losing something so precious as freedom of speech, freedom of expression, is there. It's impossible. It's there because it starts gradually, and then it becomes later a problem that nobody can deal with. Adolf Hitler started to accuse the media of fabrication. And just like here in the United States, when Donald Trump accused the media of fake news, the people at the rallies cheer Donald Trump. Very similar scenario in Germany. Very similar scenario in Germany. When Adolf Hitler accused the media of fabrication, the people boo the media, the people cheer Adolf Hitler. Here in the United States, when Donald Trump accused the media of fake news, the people cheer Donald Trump and boo the media. Not too long ago in Tampa, Florida, there was a mob at Trump rallies that was chanting against CNN. So when you see those things evolving right under your eyes, we know that it is dangerous because we have history as our guide, that those things, when they happen, they do not just stay there, they evolve into something more nefarious. They evolve into something that later on will deprive the public of the freedom of speech. And in Germany, that's exactly what happened. Adolf Hitler took advantage of the popularity that he had, and he passed, well, actually he didn't. He had the Congress, Reichstag, that's the equivalent of Congress here in the United States. He had the Reichstag pass what is called the Enabling Act of 1933. And what that act did was to provide the Chancellor of Germany. They didn't say Chancellor of Germany, but they said the cabinet, which actually led by the Chancellor of Germany. They gave the Enabling Act of 1933, gave the cabinet the power to strip people of their freedom, although they say temporarily. So the Enabling Act provided Adolf Hitler this temporary power to censor the media, to prevent people from talking bad about the government. It is a very dangerous path. Now, this temporary power became a permanent affair in Germany. Adolf Hitler consolidated power and became the monster that you today know of. So when people talk about Adolf Hitler, they talk about the monster that he had become, but they completely forget or unaware that Adolf Hitler was a very popular head of state, liked, loved by the people. So here in the United States, because we have a similar predicament, and journalists, people who are in the news, they're well aware of that fact. They're well aware that doing nothing may take us into the same path excuse me, as Germany in 1933. So yesterday, more than 300 news organizations agreed to put out a message and say to the American people, the media is not the enemy. Now, I would be the first to tell you that the media is somewhat an accomplice in Donald Trump's presidency. Now, I'm not going to dwell long on that because, as I mentioned, this particular program is not to blame who voted for Donald Trump, who didn't vote for Donald Trump, who liked Donald Trump, who doesn't like Donald Trump. This program is to address the issue of freedom of speech and freedom of expression in the country that's in jeopardy. Now, the media, I would be the first to say that the media is somewhat responsible to a certain extent of Donald Trump's presidency. Now, I'll say very quickly that if you remember during the 2016 presidential race, the media used Donald Trump to increase rating, to increase advertising revenues. Now, the way that the media did that is by literally handing the microphone to Donald Trump to say anything he wanted at any point in time. Any day that Donald Trump called any network, they simply hand him the microphone and he would say anything he wanted, and they would not challenge him because he helped increase revenues, he helped increase advertising revenues, he helped increase viewership. So to a certain extent, the media was somewhat responsible of the problem as well. But the media was not the only culprit. And as we're talking today about the coordination of more than 300 news organizations, news networks across the country who try to at least pass a common message and say, listen, the media is not the enemy of the country. The media is here to serve the public. And despite what Donald Trump has been saying since day one, that the media is fake news, to the contrary, the media has been trying its best to hold the Trump administration, as it has done in the past to other administrations, try to hold the Trump administration accountable. Now, I have to take a slight detour and put something here in context. Now, while the media is trying to at least hold the government accountable, now something else happened. That something else had to do with the fact that we have today the interesting factor that's not helping with the cause. It's not helping with the cause, and the reason is because of the fact that what is going on with the with that one aspect of the media that's not helping is the Fox propaganda network. Now, Fox propaganda network has actually done something that's really very detrimental to the conversation about freedom of speech. While we had 300 plus organizations across the nation trying to fight for the freedom of speech, trying to fight for the freedom of expression, while we having that, which is very troubling, because when you think about it, if you have everybody that belong to a specific body, which is the news media, trying to pass a message, and that message is simply saying, you know, the president has been trying to undermine the media by calling it fake news, but the media is not fake news. The media is here to serve the American people. As I mentioned earlier, no matter who you support, it is your responsibility to support and to defend the media. And the reason for that, it actually is crucial to defend the media, is because without journalism, there is no democracy. And Adolf Hitler recognized that in 1933. That's why his government censored the media. There was nothing that could be printed without the government giving the green light. And by the way, that's the reason the world did not know what was going on inside Germany. And that's also the reason by the time the world became aware of what was happening inside Germany, it was too late. World War II happened. So when there is no media, while you may cheer Donald Trump when he called the media fake news, but it is dangerous to go along with that, because when you lose the freedom of speech, there is nothing left. There is absolutely nothing left, because you cannot talk about the government. You cannot talk about what the government is doing that's wrong. You cannot talk about corruption. You cannot talk about abuse. You cannot talk about anything. So how do you solve your problem when you have an issue with the government? I asked a Trumpublican, which is the word I use today to refer to individuals who support Donald Trump. I asked, what would you do if there is no media? If you have your constitutional rights trampled? If the governor in your state is doing something that's wrong? If the governor or the mayor or the city councilman is corrupt, how do you address that? Today, when there is something that's done wrong by an elected official, we go to the media, we do what we call whistleblowing. And the media put that information out, and that put pressure on the individual, on the elected official, either to correct the problem or we vote that person out of office. But what if there is no media? Who do you go to? So when you cheer the president of the United States trying to delegitimize the media, what you're really doing is putting a gun in your own head, pull the trigger, and hope there is no bullet. You cannot, no matter where you stand, whether you support the president or not is totally irrelevant. And I'm not here asking you not to support the president. I'm not here lobbying for you to move away from the president of the United States. Now, no matter what you do with your vote is fine by me. This is currently, it still is. It's still a democracy, and you are free to do whatever you so choose. But what happened if you lose that? In 1933, once Adolf Hitler censored the media, the people could no longer talk. In fact, people were being thrown in jail at random, just taken from the place, from the house while they're sleeping. If the government suspect, if the Adolf Hitler government suspected someone was not totally and fully in compliance, meaning not talking badly about the government, not saying anything bad about the government, they would be taken away, weeks away from their house in the middle of the night or early in the morning, because that's what happens when you lose the freedom to speak. Remember, I mentioned that Adolf Hitler was very liked. 90+% of the German population loved Adolf Hitler. He was a very popular man. But once he became chancellor, he worked towards muffling freedom of speech. And once he prevented the media from printing what's bad about his government, then he could do whatever he wanted to the people. So when you go along cheering Donald Trump when he said that the media is fake news, all you're doing is stripping yourself of the very freedom that you enjoy today. I don't know about you, but I'm not willing to give that up. And the people, the very people who were cheering Adolf Hitler, the very people who were telling him that they loved him, the very people who stood on the street rallying for him, cheering him, clapping for him, once they were stripped of their freedom of speech, they could no longer speak. Now they become fearful of him. And that's just the way it works. Once you lose the freedom to speak, then you lose everything. Here in the United States, we still have the freedom of speech, but it is being undermined by the President of the United States, the same person who took an oath to protect it. Now, I don't know about you, and I doubt very much you would go along with anybody, any president, anyone in the Oval Office undermining your freedom to speak. So if it's bad no matter who sits in the Oval Office. And unless you, including you who support Donald Trump, unless you can find the courage to say, Mr. President, I support you, but you cannot undermine the media, because the media is what helps to preserve democracy in the country. And what any dictator do once they get in power is to undermine freedom of speech, to undermine the media. Adolf Hitler accused the media of fabrication before he censored the media. So that was step one, accuse the media of fabrication. Step 2, censor the media. So anything the media had to print had to get the approval of Adolf Hitler cabinet. And of course, if you're trying to print something bad, it's not going to be printed. So we are at step 1 here in the United States, where Donald Trump, every single day, by tweet, at rallies, during interviews, accuse the media of fake news. Now, if you are a Trump supporter, I'm asking you to consider what it would be like if you lose your freedom of speech. And this is where we are today. We are at step 1. Accuse the media of fake news. And that step is trying to undermine what the media says, so that later on, when and if Donald Trump were to have the power to completely control the media, then that would be the next step. And once there is no media, who would prevent him from doing whatever he wants? Because nobody could challenge him. So the freedom that you enjoy today is in jeopardy. Now, here's what makes it even more troubling, is to have a propaganda network trying to defend trying to support the very idea of putting a muzzle in the media. Now listen to Laura. You know, remember that person, Laura? Remember her? Now listen to what she has to say. Listen for a moment to what she has to say. We'll come back on the next side and discuss that.
Remember when it was bad for local media to convey coordinated messages over the airwaves? You know, like when Sinclair Media asked local anchors at their stations to read the same promo script to describe their newscasts. They were derided by legacy media as Orwellian, Soviet-style propagandists who had created local Stepford wives. Oh, the outrage.
You get the idea there, what's going on. All these anchors and all these markets are required to read this script. It's attacking fake news.
If you are centralizing a political message to however many, more than 200 stations, I think it'll be if they get the FCC approval for this, to 200 stations, you have one of the great political messaging machines in the world.
So it was an abuse of the media for Sinclair to air these homogenized promos in local markets. But when the legacy media coordinate messages across local markets, it's apparently no problem at all. Tomorrow, over 350 papers organized by the Boston Globe will print coordinated editorials to denounce the president for his fake news comments and media trash talk. Sounds like one of the great political messaging machines in the entire world, if you ask.
Now, you may not necessarily grasp the whole discussion that the whole aspect of the discussion that Laura was trying to make a comparison between Sinclair Broadcasting and what the media did yesterday. Now, here's the gist of it. A few months ago, Sinclair Broadcast Network, now that is a kind of a competition to Fox. They are right-leaning. They are mostly Republican, and they Sinclair Broadcasting Network is hoping to take a bite out of Fox viewership. So they pretty much fighting for the same audience. Now, what Laura was talking in that clip that you just saw is the fact that when Sinclair Broadcast Network a few months ago had what they call a coordinated editorial program. So what that means is at the top level of the network, the executive at the network decided to have one single script that all the branches across the network would be using for the public. For instance, if you live in Seattle and you hear the network talking, making an editorial about how bad the Democrats are, then you would be in Washington, D.C., in California, in Minnesota, in Michigan, in Illinois. No matter where you at, you will hear the exact same message. Not something similar, not something close, exactly the same thing. So whatever sentence, whatever paragraph, whatever words were used in Seattle, that's the same thing that would be using in Michigan, in Boston, in New York, etc., etc. So that's what Sinclair Broadcast did. And the whole news organization across the nation was screaming bloody propaganda. And Laura is comparing, in that clip that you just saw, Laura was comparing that with what happened yesterday. Meaning yesterday we had more than 300 news organizations that had what we call a similar approach to pushing back to Donald Trump calling the media fake news. Now, she was comparing apple, not even with another fruit. She was comparing apple with animal. And the reason is because what happened yesterday is nothing close or compared to what Sinclair Broadcasting was doing. Now, of the more than 300 organizations that put out a message and tell the president and tell the American people, we are not fake news, each one of those organizations, they put out whatever statement that they want. They use whatever way that they choose to talk about it. In fact, if you listen to what I wrote in collaboration of that event, I actually held the media accountable to a large extent for its complicity in what happened during the 2016 presidential election. So there is no, in contrast to what happened with the Sinclair Broadcasting, where if the network in Boston read that Sinclair Broadcasting declare XYZ ABC, now if you in Boston you heard that, then someone in Washington would hear the same thing that we Sinclair Broadcasting declare X, Y, and Z. But what happened yesterday is very different. What the message was, it's every single network, the Boston Globe, said what they had to say in their own way. Boston Herald, Washington Post, New York Times, whoever participated in passing that message to tell the American people, we are not fake news, they did it in their own voice, in their own way. So there was no coordination in terms of messaging. That's a big difference. So that wasn't propaganda, that was a way for the news organization to say to the American people, we are here for you to report the news, we are not fake news. Now, I will be the first to tell you that contrary to what you may have heard, there is definitely bias in the news media. And the reason that there is bias is because the news organization, all news organization, have people reporting the news. So there is no way you can remove bias from the news, because we are human beings, we have our own biases. However, people in the news, they strive very hard to be very objective. So we do not wake up every morning and say, how do we convince people about XYZ ABC? This is what propaganda does. And if you want propaganda, you can just tune in to Fox. Fox has blatantly, openly, publicly admitted and do propaganda for the Republican Party. This is not a matter for debate. This is something that's done broad daylight. They admit it. There may be one or two people at Fox, Shepherd is probably one of maybe a couple of people who decide to do news the way that news is meant to be. Smith Shepherd, I apologize for bungling his name. So in the news itself, the news media, again, we know that we have bias. But every day, what we doing when we reporting or the news or analyzing a particular topic, especially political, social topic, we try as best as humanly possible to be objective. That doesn't mean bias is not gonna slip in, but we try to correct it every now and then, every so often. Even when we don't catch it ourselves, somebody else does, then we go and correct it. In contrast to other organizations such as Fox, blatantly a propaganda machine for the Republican network, and for War, Breitbart, Rush Limbaugh, there is no if and but about that. Those people are in the business just to do that, to promote a particular party. Those are not news. They are propaganda network. Now, does being biased mean what we're saying is not true? No. It simply means we are human beings. We may say something that may be biased, but we strive every day to say something that's objective, that's appropriate. Now, some people may come up with the idea that since the news media is biased, then why listen to it at all? Then we go back to the same conversation we had before as to, if we don't have the news media to defend you against government's corruption, we don't have the news media to defend you against any member of the government or any private organization doing corruption, then who exactly would you go to if that happened? Who do you appeal to? If the very people that's doing wrong to you, you cannot go to the same people, because those are the people you want to hold accountable. And the only way that can happen is to go to the news media and appeal to the rest of the country of corruption, of wrongdoing. So when the government trample your constitutional right, the only recourse you have is to go to the media and ask for help, to let people know what's going on so that they too can help in the process. Because once you have enough people in the country pressing or putting pressure on someone who has committed harm, who has done harm to an individual or to a group, at least that can be redressed. But what if there is no news media? Where would you go? So that is the danger of going along with the idea of shutting up the news media. So when you go along with the president calling the media fake news, now picture for one moment now that you have problem with the government and there is no news media to help you. Then who do you go to? So it doesn't matter who you support. And as I mentioned earlier, I'm not here to tell you not to support Donald Trump, because this is not what this program is for. This program is to tell you that the news media is not your problem. The news media is not the enemy. The news media is here to help you so that when you have problem, you can go to the news media and try to address it, because without the news media, then you don't have any way of holding the government accountable. Now, you may be a Trump supporter, but you cannot possibly not know that there are a lot of things that his administration have been doing that's actually bad for the country. Now, unless you have the news media reporting on that, unless you have the news media uncovering corruption, if you take a step back for a short minute, you remember Pruitt, Scott Pruitt, who was the EPA administrator, and he had conducted himself in a very corrupt manner. By the time he was forced out, he had more than 21 cases of corruption against him. Without the media, where would you find that? Where would you find that out? How would you know? So the media is not the enemy of the people. The media is here to help advance, to help preserve the freedom of speech, the freedom of expression we have enjoyed for so long. And if we let, whether it's the Trump administration or any other administration, get rid of, trample, eliminate the only tool we have to fight against tyranny, to fight against abuse, to fight against authoritarian ideals, then there is nothing left as far as democracy here in the United States. Democracy is not just a word. Democracy cannot exist on its own. It's a set of structure in place that help preserve democracy. The framers of the Constitution were well aware of the fact that we may at some point have a rogue executive branch. We may have a rogue, an executive branch running amok. So the framers of the Constitution created a government with 3 equal branches. So whether it's the executive branch, the legislative branch, or the judiciary branch, they are all equal and they have equal power. So the President of the United States is not above the legislative branch, meaning Congress and the Senate do not answer to the President of the United States. The framers of the Constitution made it such so that when we have an executive branch running amok, then the legislative branch can rein in the executive branch and say, remember, this is a republic. We cannot afford to let an executive branch do whatever it wants and say the hell with the people. Freedom of speech, freedom of expression is one of the most important pillars guaranteed in the Constitution. So if you go out cheering Donald Trump for calling the media fake news, you are contributing to stripping the country of its freedom. You are contributing to stripping yourself of the freedom you have enjoyed. Because don't get in your mind that if Donald Trump becomes a dictator, you will be spared. That's not what happened in Germany. When Adolf Hitler became a dictator, even the very people who worshipped him, the very people who loved him, they were all under the same treatment as everybody else. Arrested for no reason. If you're talking to someone and and one of the agents of Adolf Hitler administration decide that you may be talking bad about Adolf Hitler, they just whisk you away, throw you in jail if you're lucky, killed most of the time. So freedom of speech, freedom of expression is the tool that we have to combat tyranny. So whenever you hear anybody making any argument that it's okay for the president to say those things, it's not okay. It's not okay for any president. Not for Donald Trump. Would you accept that for another president? That's the way you have to look at everything that you're trying to weigh, because this is too important for you to let somebody just take it away from you. A number of people, including most likely your parents, your grandparents, your ancestors, if you weren't born here in the United States, they came here in the United States looking for that kind of freedom that you enjoy today. Now, you may not know anything about not having the freedom, because if you were born in the United States, you take it for granted. And in your mind, you could not possibly fathom the idea that you can use that freedom. Well, let me assure you that you can. Germany was a country that has the freedom, just like here in the United States, that had a constitution that's almost similar to the United States. Freedom of speech, it had freedom of speech, it had freedom of expression, it had freedom to move about, it had a Congress and a Senate just like here. Of course, they weren't called that. It was the Reichstag and the Reichsrat, which is the equivalent of Congress and Senate here in the United States. They had a president. They didn't have vice president. They had the chancellor. The chancellor is the equivalent of vice president. Of course, well, actually, I said that wrong. The chancellor was kind of a co-president, because the chancellor actually run the country, run Germany. The president is like a figure of power who only intervene in certain circumstances. So when Adolf Hitler became Chancellor of Germany, Germany enjoyed freedom. People were free to move about, to say whatever they want, to go wherever they wanted. First step Adolf Hitler took is to call the media to accuse the media of fabrication. That's the first step Adolf Hitler took. Accuse the media of fabrication over and over and over. When it was felt certain that he had enough popularity, he moved in to take the very next step, to censor the media. And when you hear the word censoring the media, it's not a nice word. What that means is, what to censor the media means, before anything is printed, the government in power has to approve it. So picture you trying to say something bad about the government, that will never be printed. So when you hear to censor the media, that means you cannot say or do anything without the government giving its stamp of approval. And that's what happened in Germany. After accusing the media of fabrication, Adolf Hitler censored the media. And from that point on, everything went downhill, because there was nobody to talk about government corruption. There was nobody to talk about government's abuse. The next time Germany came in the news for people to know anything that was going on was World War II. So it is dangerous. It is a very dangerous path for anyone, supporters and detractors alike, to support Donald Trump accusing the media of fake news. If you value the freedom you have today, if you want to preserve it, this is one fight you want to join the rest of the country on. You want to tell the president, no, you cannot call the media fake news. Well, there is one way you can start pushing back. Do not cheer the president when he said something like that, or anything to that effect. When he accused the media of fake news, when he accused the media, labeled the media of disgusting, you cannot cheer him. Because if you do, you participated in helping him destroying the very freedom you have enjoyed. And sooner or later, there will be none left for you to enjoy. I'll be right back. Donald Trump is wrong to call the media the enemy of the country. Adolf Hitler did exactly the same thing in 1933, accused the media of fabrication before he moved to censor everything that was printed. This move is very standard for any authoritarian, for any dictator. We knew before it happened that Donald Trump was not fit for the Oval Office. But we stay silent in the name of fairness. We knew before it happened Donald Trump would be a disaster for the world. But we stay silent in the name of fairness. We knew beforehand Donald Trump is a racist, but we stay silent in the name of fairness. We, members of the media, can no longer stay silent. Journalists are not in the business of fairness. Our business, our only business, is to be objective. Let us from now on hold the Trump administration accountable. It is our job. It is the only reason to be in this business. It is our duty to hold Trump and every administration accountable. Today, it is urgent, it is necessary, it is critical. Our very freedom depends on it.
Wayfair, you've got just what I need. Everything from my home, you got it for me. I never see selection quite like this. Every color and size in my mind. They got every single thing on my list. And with 70% off, who knows what I'll find. Wayfair, you've got just what I need. Everything from my home, you got it for me. Wayfair, and the shipping was free. Now my home's the home I want.
From all of us at Wayfair, find what you need today.
Ignorance, they say, is the biggest threat to any democracy. Indeed, it is. Plato, a Greek philosopher born in 427 BC, said that ignorance is the root and stem of all evil. Today, members in the Republican Party wear ignorance as a badge of honor, while the rest of the country watch powerless the destruction of a country which was once the envy of the world. The media is the enemy of the country, said Donald Trump. The Democrat legislators are obstructionists for not going along with everything the president wants. The Department of Justice is biased for investigating corruption in the Trump administration. This is the United States of America. Any question? One answer is located on the People Branch website, link of which is provided below. Join me here on the 4th branch at 10:30 a.m. and 6:30 p.m. every Saturday. Thank you for watching. I hope you have a good afternoon, and hope to see you in for our next broadcasting, which will be Saturday at 10:30 a.m. Have a wonderful day.